Top 10 worst Gen 7 Pokemon. Wow, nice clickbait, Salacock.
I know what's wrong with it, but I'm leaving it in.
First, you've got an audio balancing problem. I had some difficulty hearing what you were saying because you forgot to lower the volume of the portion you were talking over. Second, I agree that lamp shading without resolution is just as much of a problem, but at least the video is indicative of what the title promises and isn't written in a fashion that was specifically designed to piss people off, like Pokemon that shouldn't exist, for example. In this case, the lamp shading is fine.
Do you?
How could this happen to me? I made my mistake.
I personally don't mind you using an overused sound clip like that, but even though I don't get tired of it, you should be careful about it, since this is something that other people will get on your case for doing, since a lot of people have used that song.
The problem people would have with it is being used in a non-creative fashion. If used smartly and cleverly, no one would care as much. Also, the skip effect is just a brief flash of an overscanned skip button. No music, no flashy effects, nothing remotely funny. I'm not asking you to copy my skip shtick. I'm just asking you to add a little pizzazz to your skip. This is still entertainment after all. Some text indicating what you're skipping and why wouldn't hurt either.
And beyond that, I do want to iterate, these entries are based on designs and designs only. So if I end up putting something on this list as a super dark Pokédex entry or whatever the heck, note that I'm only focusing on the appearances of these guys. Because, you know, I'm super shallow or whatever.
And that's where this list begins to fall flat on its face. You're saying these Pokemon are the worst because of designs alone. That's why you should change the title to Top 10 Worst Designed Pokemon.
The design is still a major factor to a Pokemon as well as its appeal. Would you rather have your partner be a Raptor Mantis or a Rock with Arms? I'm assuming what Psylocke means by this is that he's not really a competitive player and bases his opinions of a Pokemon primarily on their designs than their types and battle value. A lot of casual players would likely share a similar viewpoint.
Psylocke,
Yeah?
are you sure you aren't just making this video to piss people off? Are you sure?
No, I seriously just thought this would be a fun video to make.
Yeah, well then how do you explain that?
Look, I can explain.
Ties are something that are looked down upon by many members of the Countdown community nowadays. I don't really have a problem with ties myself, but when it's a tie between 9 different Pokemon, that's insane.
Well, you can seriously condense it by saying that a lot of players bunch an evolution line as a single Pokemon, since the final stage is often the natural end result most players will seek anyway. I see a Mudkip and think primarily of the Swampert I'm going to get. Things like that are what save commonly mocked Pokemon like Zubat, since Crobat is awesome! Besides, ties like this can work if they share many things in common to justify their place, but none do anything better or worse enough to justify putting any of them higher or lower.
My only problem is, despite thinking the design looks solid enough, does this look like a starter to you? It certainly doesn't to me. It looks like one of the field birds you find early on in the game.
It's an owl, so of course it's going to look like Hoot Hoot. That's like complaining about how Zubat and Woobat look alike. They're fucking bats! Let's go back to the starters then. Pigs, Azalatols, alligators and or crocodiles, foxes... Monkey! What exactly constitutes an authentic starter Pokemon designed to use Psylocke? Would Pikachu or Eevee count since they're both used as starters and found in the wild depending on the game?
The game literally states that he, quote-unquote, is going through a phase.
Really? You're going to have a long subtitle on the screen for a split second? Do you realize what you're doing? You're making your audience have to work during this video by having to keep rewinding and pausing on the right clip.
That's part of the joke, and the text it outright says at the end. Anyways, you can unpause the video now. Love you. Love you too, sweetheart. Wait, did I just say that? Motherfucker!
Also, can I just point out that this thing only has a little more than a 1 out of 10 chance of being a female? Yeah, Miss Popstar over here, most likely a dude.
While I agree with you that this is a problem with Bryony, nearly all starter Pokemon have an 87.5 to 12.5 ratio of being male and female. This would have been a better point if you were to say, this is why the whole starter ratio doesn't work for Poplio, or something like that.
Isn't that what he's getting at in a roundabout way? You don't have to spell everything out to your audience like that.
Hey, stop being sexist. Mermaids can be guys too. No, they can't. Otherwise, you're just called merman. Mermaid is a portmanteau of the words mer and may. May being a word that refers to female sex. Sarah, nobody cares. Then just stop. It's always something with you.
Psylocke, I know you're trying to be funny, but this drags on for way too long. Seriously, you spent about 24 seconds on that Kermit footage, or should I say Constantine footage because of his shorter collar. Now bear with me. This isn't the only time he has one of those clips go on for too long, but I cut most of them out because I don't want to repeat myself.
For a bit like that, it's honestly not that long, and the pacing's fine enough for it to not feel like it dragged on. If it went on for like 40 seconds to a minute, it'd be one thing.
Oh no. Please don't make a Trump joke. Please don't make a Trump joke. Please don't make a Trump joke!
Trumpy, you can do stupid things!
Also, he evolves in his Trump.
That's it!
I hate this so much that I'm going to blow up the Realm of Darkness?
And if the design wasn't enough, the thing is also a dragon type. Why? Its type alone made it a meme.
I can understand the whole it's typing alone made it a meme point, but to answer your question as to why it's a dragon type, I did some research and it's basically based off the Dracania tree, which contains over 100 types of trees in Hawaii and are called dragon trees.
Its type may be a reference to the Dracana genus. It may also be a pun inspired by the Coca, a dragon whose name shares the same origins as the word coconut, and Alolan Exeggutor resembles a coconut tree. So, consider the coconut! Come on, what else am I gonna make that reference?
I think the best part about Alolan Trio, well, besides memes, are the Pokedex entries. And no, Kermit, before you say anything, these didn't factor into the votes, I just thought they were funny.
I'm sorry, what?
These didn't factor into the votes, I just thought they were funny.
Did you just say votes? Are you saying this whole list is based off some kind of contest that you held and asked people to vote on this? But you just said earlier...
So while this may seem needless to most people, I do feel obligated to say this list is based on my opinions. I mean, no shit, right? It is a top 10 after all.
So what is it? Is this your personal opinion? What do people vote on it? The description doesn't explain this, the tarot doesn't explain this, so what am I supposed to think? Your wording of this confuses me to no end.
Come on, Meta, we've all used words before without realizing what they mean in the context we use them in. It's clear that he means that they didn't factor into his thoughts on Alolan Dugtrio.
The entry in Sun says, its shining gold hair provides it with protection. Yeah, those crazy mad defense skills, all in the hair, baby.
While I do agree it's a very lazy design choice, I have an answer to your question of how the hair protects it. It's based on something called Pale's hair. It's supposedly formed from the stretching of basaltic grass from lava. It's not recommended to touch because it's supposedly very sharp. That's where I think they were going with this.
And where Psylocke was going with his segment was that Alolan Dugtrio was described as having added protection with its hair, despite still having a pitiful defense stat. To be fair, the added protection could be referring to its tangling hair ability, dropping the opponent's speed when it's hit with a move that makes contact with it.
Hello, this is ToonLord635 here, and today I'll be going over a list of 15 sets that Gork Studios, Shadow Wolf Hound, and I deem to be the worst Bionicle sets.
Oh, we're representing ourselves in our mocks? Nah.
Kicking off this list, we got the Toanuva.
Oh, no you don't. The Toanuva aren't flawless, but not 15 worst sets bad. As a result, here are some of the sets you've indirectly given a free pass to. The Balrog Call, who were the definition of laziness for this franchise. Kreka, who was a hot mess to begin with. Umbra, with its difficulty in standing and overtly clashing color scheme and year gimmicks. And with the clear bias against G2 we'll be seeing later, I'm surprised you didn't jump at the chance to shit on Lord of Skull Spiders, whose build sacrifices articulation for a single gimmick in a way that might make it a reasonable objective choice. I love the set myself, but I'm just throwing that out there.
The new limb piece restricts forward movement to points unimaginable. I don't think any of us really thought that it could get worse than the Mata. So, they did. The leg piece has a little stopper molded into the upper piece.
Can you zoom in out a bit? There we go. For the record, I still can't see what you're referring to. I can show you myself since I have one of those Nuva limbs. Here's what they're talking about.
I'm pretty sure they could have gone away with just including normal arms and putting wings in the back of it. Or heck, take some inspiration from a clone of him, which would be Mutron.
How do those two look like clones of each other? In the traditional Bionicle sense.
Not to mention, Hordika legs. Disgusting.
They are a disease that should be terminated with extreme prejudice.
You know, you never heard about anybody terminating with mild prejudice, do you?
2008 was a pretty hated year, and people didn't think it worse than that. Well, here's 2015, we'll get into that later.
I thought 2015 was pretty well liked, at least in terms of sets. Your mileage may vary, of course, but at least I thought it was better received in 2008. It seemed to be at worst controversial.
And the Metru feet, ugh, that just makes proportions awkward.
Really? They don't look too bad. And if you think they do, it's clear that this is the least of the set's problems.
I really think they should have switched Onua and Gali around if they're gonna do that. Switch the colors around, at least Gali and stick as bulky.
While they do belong on a list like this for their base builds, what's stopping you from doing just that? Get both sets, swap the appropriate connectors in the feet, give the weapons and masks over, and they would probably look better for you. I'm not defending them, especially if the sets were built already given their fragile connector pieces, but I just wanted to get that thought out there.
Some people may argue that Combiner model isn't exactly a set, which is true. As if LEGO would upload instructions to the website, it would not have been an actual set. But Ultimate Doom was released at Target exclusive. The same goes for Voparak, Cardaz, and I think that's about it. Even Ernak was released at Walmart exclusive. So here we go. Awkwardly thin limbs, poorly distributed color scheme, and a model looks absolutely nothing like it's supposed to. Look in the Legends of Metru Nui and you'll see what the set's supposed to look like. Makuta with wings. They failed miserably to make it even look reminiscently close to what it's intended to be.
It's taking 3 drastically different sets with 3 drastically different color schemes, one of which was, as I said earlier, a hot mess to begin with. You can't take Kreka, Nidiki, Duma, and Nivok and expect to make something as consistent as 2003 Shadow Titan Makuta. For the record, if it's not supposed to look like that, then why did the comics use that design? The movie diverged from the set really because they ate up their model budget creating entirely new models for most of the characters. So it's more of the movie not following the set by limitations. That, and I think it's supposed to look cobbled together, since it is canonically made from those 3 characters. I personally think it looks awesome for what it is. If we're talking combiner models that were sold at retail, then Ernak is worse at it than Ultimate Duma.
I'm pretty sure most of you are going to question why these sets didn't place lower in our list, because these are the most hated sets of Bionicle, the Toa Hordika.
Really? I thought the Toa Mistaka were among the most hated Bionicle sets. And different strokes for different folks, I suppose.
2005 was a pretty shitty year for Bionicle all around. Nobody really liked it. The only set that I see people praise constantly is Rudaka, and that's for, well, disgusting reasons that we will not bring up.
I thought all the Titans from that year were alright. And what about the Vizorak? We got the Toa Haga that year too, who were more of the beloved Toa Metru. 2005 isn't as much of a total loss as you claim it to be. Also, stop implying we want to bone our toys.
It is cool that they didn't completely butcher the set with a function much like the Metru.
So those are the Toa Metru? Lego, you've lied to me for the better half of my entire childhood!
Here we got the Protector of Earth, also known as Korgot. This thing is supposedly a female.
I always thought they finalized these sets long before settling their characters, hence why Korgot looks more masculine than, say, the feminine-looking male Kivoda. It does feel like they swapped their genders just for the hell of it, but then again, I've seen worse instances of viewer gender confusion.
I'm a man. Whoop, gotta go.
With a tomb on his back, an odd neck, and a boring color scheme that poorly distributes its secondary color, we have an overall unlikable set.
And that's all you need! Not that the large blades and lengthy head left over from the larger Skrull constantly clash and make it awkward to pose, or that it suffers from the same issues as the Av-Matoran with pre-bent limbs and a torso that can't be used any more creatively than what they were intended to be used for.
Another batch of clones for the mid-years of Bionicle, we have the Rahaga, a group of midgets with Roxy heads and odd posability. No individual elements, no creativity, just a generic, shitty $5 set.
I would hardly call them uncreative given the pieces they're made out of, but I do admit that the Roxy heads made them look like villain sets until Web of Shadows proved me wrong. They are awkward and not the best sets, but at least they make decent parts packs.
People call it male Golly, and I enjoy calling it that name, because this set genuinely strikes me as a male. They failed to give the set feminine proportions, and they failed to strike it off as a female to me. Some people may argue that's the most feminine set of Bionicle, but we disagree.
Then how does one make a female using CCBS? Hell, how is Galimata or no Commentaries any more feminine than this Gali, especially compared to their male counterparts? If you're going as far as to criticize the figure for being masculine design, then please elaborate on how a CCBS figure can come off as feminine to you. You all have a Worst Hero Factory sets video where you labeled Breakout Breeze as the original male Gali, where you also never explained how the system can create a female figure either, as if the answer's obvious. If it's because they use the same build as their male contemporaries, then how is that any different from Galimata, Nuva, or no Commentaries, who are built exactly like their male companions? I'm not providing an answer because I admit I don't have one. I don't have a creative enough mind to figure that one out. But then again, not every female has to be flawlessly curved. If anything, given the parts that they had, I think this is the most feminine CCBS is going to get until they make female-specific pieces, which probably isn't going to happen. And if you disagree that's the most feminine set of Bionicle, then show us what you think is the most feminine set of Bionicle. If it's Rudaka, then she's a Titan set, so of course she has the pieces to make her look feminine. We're looking at an apples-to-apples comparison here with Galimata Nuva, no Commentaries, and Galia Koto. And one last note, female characters have used male masks, and the masks introduced on female characters have been used on males as well. So the feminine mask argument is weak too.
Your move, creep.
The random trans orange is funny as well. I find it odd that every trans orange piece aside from the Borak eyes and the trans light blue and skull warrior doesn't exist in the color that goes along with these sets. Wouldn't it be nice if we had trans purple 3-longs? Not just for mocking, would have improved the look of the set. People say the trans orange adds an evil element to it, but if you ask me, it makes it look silly.
Oh no, how dare the trans orange break up a dull gray color scheme. Also, it serves as another element that unites these skull villains. If the armored parts that could imply a burning rage is silly looking, then I just don't get you.
By adding bright colors to a supposedly evil and dark set, they kind of ruin the color scheme and the overall look of the set.
By that logic, the 2009 Skrull, Shadow Titan Makuta, and Maxillots are all stupid looking. This could also be conceived as a problem on a set you guys praised in another video, Black Phantom, who has as much trans neon green armor as Skullbasher has trans neon orange. A whole 2 pieces!
A random dark gray Nike torso that throws off the color scheme is just one of the many things wrong with this set.
Again, how dare they break up an overtly bright green color scheme?
I don't know who thought it'd be a good idea to spam lime green Av-Matoran limbs on a canister set. I really don't. Odd looks, odd proportions, and odd color placement, yeah, this is worthy of being called the 4th worst Bionicle set.
That was quick for not only the 4th worst set on the list, but also a set you claim to have numerous flaws. Also, notice the lack of positive things said about these sets. Even the worst things have something of value about them.
This set only has 2 pieces of cladding, much less than XD4. Sure, he's a skeleton, but he's also a gladiatorial warrior according to the storyline in LEGO Magazine.
Holy shit, a legitimate criticism of a G2 Bionicle set! Don't get used to it, guys.
LEGO's refusal to make new pieces is painfully obvious.
Yeah, LEGO refuses to make any new pieces. That's why the Skull villains introduced spine armor, femur bones, 2 new masks, 2 new weapon types, and these curved bits. I won't argue about lacking certain recolors, but my point still stands. Also, isn't LEGO supposed to be about reusing the same old parts and making something new out of them?
Seeing as LEGO decided to reuse the Skull Spider mask, a piece that we've seen 13 other times, with 4 of those being the same color of flat silver.
It's one thing if they spammed it as another silver Skull Spider, but here, it's used as a face and not a creature. It actually gives Slicer a distinct visual identity from the other Skull villains, and as much as I don't find Slicer that great a design at the moment, I at least think that the Skull Spider mask does look good on him. Well, better than if they just spammed another of the Skull villain masks.
Another fine example of Transformers being an eyesore.
Because a mostly neon green build isn't an eyesore.
This set is overall messy, starting off with a poorly constructed weapon that you've pretty much seen before with the Jungle and Stone Protector.
How is the bow poorly constructed? Your arguments are poorly constructed!
Unoriginality, sloppiness.
He's supposed to be an undead warrior, of course it looks sloppy! And it doesn't need to bring much new, seeing as how he's a generic soldier.
The good guy and bad guy polybags. These sets are shitty, but they don't really come off as actual sets since they're promotions and freebies.
And they do try to pull off a design out of the limited pieces. And like the Rahaga, they make decent parts packs if you go out of your way to get them.
Skull Scorpio. You know a set sucks when even Pedo Jang hates it.
And that matters because...
No posability in the legs, random trans-orange claws that are a massive eyesore that you can't even fix because we do not have trans-lime green claws.
Again! Adding trans-lime green to a set already screaming with it won't look worse?
Like, if they should have done something along the lines of the new Ijaga, where it's this actual stinging tail rather than a pair of scissors mounted to the back of this thing.
To harp on your obvious stumble here would be too hypocritical. But luckily, there are other things I childishly bitched and moaned about.
Feel free to agree, disagree, write your own lists, do whatever. Comment calling us brain-dead retards.
I won't go that far. You did that yourselves. The main owner of this channel also did a commentary on the 3 Virtues' worst Bionicle sets list. Specifically the number 1 segment, which is the Av-Matoran from 2008's Fantoga line, with special criticism reserved for Solek. There are some legitimate arguments here, but it's bad enough to commentate on.
That great honor goes to the Av-Matoran, but specifically, Solek. The Av-Matoran build perfectly represents everything that went wrong with the later years of Bionicle Generation 1. It took away the functions and complexity of design that Bionicle had been known for its entire lifespan.
Do you know what are you talking about? The Matoran have always been like that, besides 2007 somewhat, and 2006 with the ugly looking Matoran was just really simple builds and just had feet for their body besides the cool Matoran.
What's wrong with having Bohrok feet for a torso? Honestly, using a part explicitly designed to be a foot as a torso shows how creative some of these designers can be. The Av-Matoran had pre-designed chunks of plastic that can hardly be used for anything other than this build. You could argue the same with the Metro Nui Matoran and the 2003 guys as well, but the Baki and Sidorak derailed that argument. The piece count dropped with these guys too.
As for the function, all the Matoran besides 2003 only have weapon gimmicks that could easily be replaced with something else that isn't a gimmick. Like, I don't know, nachos, a chimpanzee, a protest sign saying Lego, please get us better sockets, these keep cracking a lot.
A lightsaber, a golden mask of power, a better sense of humor.
Plus, again with the 2006 Matoran, they never have a function at all, so why aren't they on the honorable mentions as well?
Because at least they're creative in their parts reuse. And if you don't like them as sets, you can use them as a decent parts pack. Try implementing any of the Av-Matoran pieces into a mock. Other than that part! And if you use Gardas as an example of how they can be implemented, I think you're overlooking the fact that Gardas is a nearly indistinguishable mass of limbs. That's the point of the character, I get that. And I understand that most combiners are just as big of a mess. But if that's the best you can do with those pieces, then it shows how truly specialized they were. At least we saw the Mata and Nuva limbs used in other sets. And they get a free pass because they were just starting out and trying to figure things out. And we loved them when we were kids anyway, which adds a veil of nostalgia to their charm.
In favor of large, specialized chunks of plastic, pre-bent limbs that could not articulate in the slightest, and, in the case of the Av-Matoran, obnoxious large heads that protruded from the neck to a crazy degree. These problems persisted across numerous waves of Bionicle in the future, including the Av-Matoran, Agori, and Bionicle Stars. The basic formula even spilled over into Hero Factory.
The Matoran never have any good movable limbs ever, and even the Mata and Nuva didn't have it as well, and they also have big chunks of plastic. Also, these Matoran are the best movable sets when it comes to the Matorans. I mean, look at all the other use of the Matorans. They all have problem with moving their arms and legs, and even posing.
Again, the Mana and Nuva limbs were at least implemented into other sets. Better than that! And really, all of the Matoran had the exact same amount of articulation. The Av-Matoran were the most free in their movement, I'll grant you that, but the others were made using mostly pre-made parts in new and creative ways, at least in 2006 and 2007. Also, I will defend Pirate to my grave as one of the best Matoran we ever had.
Mesonac, was you playing too much Halo Reach while making the script for this list? You know what? No Xbox for you for a day.
Oh no, not the Xbox! It's not like Mesonac can play any other gaming system, or work on video projects, or go outside and contribute something to society outside of ranting at others for having legit reasons to hate on bad sets.
Now, the basic build is shared among these waves, so all of them automatically receive honorable mentions in this countdown. The Agorian Stars, however, had certain sets that at least occasionally broke from the simplistic design to attempt something with a modicum of creativity. I'm thinking of sets like Tarduk, sets like Zesk, even Skrull and Rakshi to a degree, and if you want to go from the 08 wave, the Shadow Matoran have Radiac, and he tried to do something.
Almost all the sets that are around the toy under its price tag are mostly humanoid build. If you are going to count that, then why give the Naika and Paraka build a free pass? Because most of those sets that have it have lack of creativity, since they have the humanoid build. While Mantax, Skrull, Shrek, and I guess Immortal did something different, instead of just doing the same thing, just with different armor.
Because the Naika and Paraka build's problems came from its unoriginal reuse throughout the 3 years it was reused for, not the issues with the sets that introduced them. Your mileage may vary with how the Naika and Paraka were, but the issues with the Av-Matoran build were there from the beginning. All of them had pre-bent limbs, all of them had few pieces, even fewer that could be used effectively in other sets, and while all of them had fragile connectors, that's hardly a problem exclusive to the Av-Matoran, as every set from that year onwards until Hero Factory 2.0's introduction of CCPS had fragile connector pieces. Also, if Motoro Mari counts as a Naika build that did something slightly different, I'm surprised you didn't include the Vorox as another example, even if it is just slapping a tail on its back.
What makes Solek worse than the other two, then, you may ask? Simple. The build may remain the same, but at least Tanma and Photok have vibrant color schemes featuring colors that had only recently begun to come back to the forefront, such as lime green and orange.
If you are going to say what I think you are going to say, I will add another day to no Xbox for you.
Quiet!
And I'll take away your chocolate milk.
No! Anything but the chocolate milk!
Solek goes so far as to take away the color of light or transparent blue that fans have become accustomed to seeing with white armored characters for years, and replaces it with gray.
Great job, Mesonac. You got no Xbox for 2 days, and you lost your chocolate milk.
No! I have soda. And apple juice.
These are the only white sets that has some sort of blue color in 2007 and under in use when they came out. Now here white sets with gray colors. Blue is hardly a big thing in white color sets. It have only became a big thing for only 2 years.
Notice that 5 of these sets have some blue in them, no matter how little. Also, 2 years is more than enough time to get used to a certain aspect of a set type, like the brown sets turning yellow, which even then only applied to Huki's Toa forms, Biddle, Glatorian Mononui, and Stars Rakshi.
Oh, by the way, Kopaka don't have any blue, and Solek is a Av-Matoran, not a Matoran.
Oh, so being an Av-Matoran excuses a boring as shit color scheme. That's great logic! Also, you showed that Matoran had the same kind of color scheme. Being an Av-Matoran is no excuse.
So, end of commentary, and now I am going to take this Xbox and putting it somewhere you can't get it.
At least the Av-Matoran have one good feature. Some of them will eventually become Bullrock. Those are classics.
Our journey starts in Professor Birch's briefcase, where we have to make the most important decision in our life. Trico, Mudkip, or Torchic.
Well, Mudkip is the cutest out of the 3 starters, so it has to be the best, right? I mean, it even has its own meme.
Plus, Swampert not only has the highest base stat total of all fully evolved starters, not counting Megas, but against a Mega 2, so that renders that point moot, but it also only has one weakness. Can you name me one other starter with only one weakness? World Gridage. That doesn't count!
Even though it was a very close call, Mudkip is not the best.
What? How?
Easy. Mudkip only helps with Roxanne, Watson, Flannery, and Tate and Liza. Other than that, he pretty much goes even with the rest of the gym leaders, with the exception of Wallace, who would give him some trouble.
The Mudkip line can learn Power Pungent Auras by the time you reach Watson, so that'll help with Norman there. Granted, it'll still have to compete with Slacking's literally legendary stats and powerful moves, but it's at least something. With Winona, Swampert also gets Rock Tomb, which is admittedly not the most reliable back then, but is more reliable and stronger in Oras. Ice Beam if you got 4,000 coins in the Marvel Game Corner in the originals at that point, and Rock Slide in Oras by level up, all of which take care of all but her Skarmory, which doesn't resist water moves. Or rock and ice moves for that matter. As for Wallace giving Swampert trouble, yes, Swampert would take neutral damage against water moves. But aside from its 190-90 bulk, none of Wallace's Pokemon save Ludicolo and Gyarados and Emerald resist ground moves, and it'll have Earthquake either by level up or by TM by that point, with the only concerns being Seeking's Horn Drill, which only hits 30% of the time anyway, and Ludicolo's Giga Drain and Emerald, but by that point Swampert has no reason to face Ludicolo over its teammates.
Well, that's true. Plus, most of the Elite Four gives him a few problems too. Sydney has a few grass Pokemon, Glacia has a few water Pokemon, and Drake, well, he has dragons. Dragons are OP.
For one, you don't bring these aspects about anyone else's teams anywhere else in the video, so it comes off as cherry-picking information to make one starter look worse than the other. As for the actual matchups, let's go about this one by one, shall we? Sydney only gave his Cacturne Needle Arm in the originals in Emerald, while Shiftry got Leaf Blade in Oras. In either case, you can get the TM for Ice Beam by then regardless of Game Corner, which takes care of both problems, provided you didn't switch out due to the speed disadvantage that only Shiftry has over Swampert. Even without the Abandoned Ship, Swampert can learn a few good fighting moves like Brick Break in the originals and Hammer Arm in the remakes, which will do a good number on Sydney's team. Plus, Sharpedo won't resist Earthquake, which will evade Rough Skin. Glacia, like Wallace, has nothing that resists ground moves regardless of game, and it can use fighting moves to hit everything except the Frostless and Auras. Its only issues are the remakes is Freeze Dry, found on her second Glalie, and her wall range Sheer Cold, but like Horn Drill that rarely hits anyway. Once again, it has no reason to be used over a party member that can take care of these kinds of Pokemon anyway. And Drake? That's a joke! Ice Beam to Hotline Bling all the way! Emerald in the remakes gives him Kingdra, but that doesn't resist ground either. And it has Yawn in Oras, which is defeated by the extremely complicated strategy of switching out.
And this is even worse in Pokemon Emerald, where Wallace is the champion this time and completely walls Swampert.
Please refer to what I said earlier about Wallace. Also, way to completely ignore its massive advantage on Steven, where only 2 of his Pokemon take neutral damage against Swampert at best, and the only lead he has on Swampert is Cradley's Giga Drain. Aggron also has Solar Beam, but Swampert's too good to allow Aggron to last more than one hit, and it loses Solar Beam in Oras, where it would have been able to take advantage of it with 30's Gen 5 revision. A little look at their move lists can go a long way in changing the results. And it further justifies my bias towards Swampert.
Well, if Mudkip isn't the best, then Trico has to be the best then. I mean, he does have the type advantage on Wallace, plus he destroys Mudkip in a one-on-one battle.
Well, no. Trico actually performs worse than Mudkip, even if it is by a little bit. Trico does well against Roxanne, Tate and Liza, Wallace, and Watson because of the resistance.
Grovyle can also get Power Punch and Oras by the time you get to Watson, so that'll take care of his Magnemite and Magneton.
The other gems aren't much of a problem except for Flannery and Winona.
You'll have Rock Tomb after Roxanne, and Trico's line can learn it, and we've established that only Winona's Skarmory isn't weak to it. Yes, Sceptile has to worry about Aerial Ace on all of her Pokemon in the originals and Emerald, but in Oras, Altaria has nothing except Dragon Breath if you chose to Mega Evolve Sceptile, which also gets access to Jewel Chop if it is a Sceptile by then. With Flannery, you got me there. With Brawly, you're right. But with Norman, again, Power Punch and Oras. Although Grovyle might not be able to endure a 160 physical attack power slacking long enough for a Power Punch to build up.
And as for the Elite Four members, he struggles against Glacier and her Ice types, Drake and his OP Dragon types, and unfortunately the biggest problem, Steven the Champion, with his Steel types.
Generalization is your biggest problem here. Glacia has 3 water types in her team in the originals in Emerald, and Ice only resists 1 type. Itself. The remakes replace her Celios with Frostless, which Sceptile can Night Slash away if you went to the move relearner with a Heart Scale and Follower, which also gives it an advantage against Phoebe. And Sceptile can also learn Brick Break. Bye bye Glalie! And none of her Pokemon outspeed Sceptile regardless of Mega Form. Hell, if we're gonna be blunt, very few Pokemon in Hoenn can outspeed Sceptile, and only 6 Pokemon so far can outspeed Mega Sceptile. And 3 of those are the same Pokemon! Sceptile can get Dragon Claw by now, Dual Chop and Oras, and a Mega Evolution to boost both. Sceptile does have to worry about Flamethrower, Fly in the originals, Aerial Ace and Emerald, and all Dragon moves plus Moon Blast and Oras if it Mega Evolves. Unlike Glacia, none of Drake's Pokemon, not even Salamence, outpaces Sceptile. And while Sceptile faces issues with Steven, given Aerial Ace, Sludge Bomb, Stavex, Scissor, and Aggron's Dragon Claw if it goes Mega, it also gets Bug moves for Cradily and Claydol, the latter of which is also vulnerable to Sceptile's Grass moves, and Earthquake for Aggron and Metagross. Cradily is also vulnerable to Brick Break. Again, move lists can make a big difference. For a topic as heavily debated as this, you need to look as far into it as possible, and present as much evidence as necessary to prove your stance. By simply leaving it at face value like this, and leaving out key advantages, you give a very different impression from what's actually true. An inaccurate one.
So that leaves us with Torchic. Wait, Torchic is the best starter Pokemon? This can't be. How can this thing that looks like a penis be the best starter Pokemon in Hoenn? It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it doesn't when you leave out crucial victories that some have over others. Seriously, how do you leave out Swampert wrecking Steven? That's a rookie-level mistake.
Well, now that I think about it, it kinda does. Yes, Torchic does have a rough start to the game with Roxanne, but if you do evolve it into a Combuskin, you do get access to Double Kick, which does super effective damage. Besides that, it goes even with Brawly and Watson.
Actually, it has the advantage over both. It can learn Peck for Brawly's fighting types, and Watson's aforementioned Magnemite and Magneton are weak to both fire and fighting.
Resist Flannery,
who has a Numel with Magnitude and Emerald and Earth Power and Auras,
and does really well against Norman. The problem starts with the last 3 gym leaders.
Winona, Wallace, and Tate and Liza all do extremely well against Blaziken. But by the time you encounter those gyms, your team should be well diverse at that point to handle Blaziken's weaknesses.
Now that bites them in the ass hard. It especially applies to Swampert since it starts struggling at Gym 8, which is far more time, especially in Hoenn where the villain team subplot concludes before Gym 8, compared to Gym 6 for Blaziken. Hell, 2 or 3 gyms is enough time to start getting good teammates, let alone 8.
Although Blaziken has the most weaknesses, we felt that it makes up for that by having the most strengths, especially when it comes to the Elite Four. He destroys Sydney, Glacia, and most importantly, Steven.
Sydney has a Sharpedo, which has priority with Aqua Jet and Auraz and outpaces Blaziken either way. Crawdon and Emerald, Shifter has Extrasensory, and Absol has Aerial Ace. Glacia has 2 Celios and a Walrein. All have Surf in the originals, and only the Walrein has it in Emerald, while in Auraz she replaces the Celios for Frostless. No more fighting on them, which also makes it struggle against Phoebe. One of them even has Draining Kiss, and Walrein has Sheer Cold no matter what, which, while it won't hit very often, can still hit. Steven has Skarmory and Armaldo with Aerial Ace, Aggron, Claydol, and Metagross with Earthquake, Armaldo's got Water Pulse, and Metagross has Psychic. In the remakes, Claydol loses Earthquake for Earth Power and packs Extrasensory, Armaldo no longer poses a threat, Metagross' Zen Headbutts does Psychic, and Aggron and Skarmory became much deadlier thanks to Sturdy. They will endure the hit, then Aerial Ace or Earthquake Blaziken to death. Especially Aggron's Earthquake, although stat-boosted Aerial Ace will hurt almost as badly. Compared to Swampert, Blaziken struggles much more with Steven despite having an advantage over 5 of his 6 Pokemon. Sceptile had to worry about less than this.
So there you have it. The definitive best starter in Hoenn is Torchic, right?
Yes, in Ruby and Sapphire. In Emerald, it's a whole nother story. There is one big difference that changes everything. The champion. In Pokemon Emerald, Steven is no longer the league champion. Instead, it's Wallace. By Wallace becoming the champion and Juan remaining a water user, this gives Sceptile the upper hand.
Sceptile still has to worry about Juan's Roar Beam, and especially Ice Beam from a neutral Kingdra. Wallace will still give Sceptile hell thanks to Tentacruel, Ludicolo, and Gyarados being neutral to Sceptile's grass moves, the latter having Intimidate, Tentacruel having Sludge Bomb, Wailord having Blizzard if it lives, and Melodic having Ice Beam if it lives. 3 out of 6 with 4 major trouble areas. I did bring up a few points to help Sceptile here, and none of Wallace's or Juan's Pokemon outpace Sceptile, so there's that.
Devil May Cry 4 came from the era when Japanese devs were desperate to appeal to new audiences because Japanese players were obsessed with mobile games. In the attempt to make their games more appealing to Westerners, many franchises were gutted, rebooted, or saw popular main characters switch for new ones. This approach pretty much ended with failure every time, as characters like Dante were already appealing to people in the West. So of course they dropped him as a lead in favor of Nero, who looks just like Dante, fights just like Dante, steals clothes from Dante's wardrobe, and has a name tied to the darker history of Christianity just like Dante.
Right away, we have the most recurring theme of the video, Nero bashing. Now, I'm not saying one can't hate Nero. He did come across similar to how Raiden originally did in Metal Gear Solid 2, and me personally, I'm more middle of the road on him, as he isn't as interesting as Dante, Virgil, Lady, or even Trish, but I don't find him as insufferable as Dardigan makes him out to be, and I loved his combat mechanics, which to be fair isn't saying much because I loved every character's gameplay. The issue is that this is an idea he continually, insistently repeats throughout the entire video, and it gets a bit grating by the end. I will agree that Nero is easy to mistake for Dante from a casual perspective.
He still missed your entire performance. Why do you look so happy? That's bad boyfriend material.
At least he made the effort to show up at all, and it seemed he would have made it at least halfway through if it weren't for the scarecrows he had to deal with. He wasn't late for lack of trying. It's also made clear throughout the rest of the scene that Kyrie is the only reason he's there and doesn't give a fuck about the Order's religion, something Kyrie is most likely very aware of.
I'm out of here.
But it's not over yet.
All this preaching's putting me to sleep.
I'll send the game for casting Liam O'Brien to play Sanctus. You pretty much give away the fact that a character is the main villain when I hear his voice behind him.
Liam O'Brien has voiced a good selection of heroic characters, even before he voiced Sanctus. You aren't wrong about Sanctus being the villain, but sometimes a voice actor's IMDb page doesn't give away a character's alignment.
Kyrie is Nero's girlfriend. Nero hides his demon arm inside that arm sling, yet his girlfriend, nor anyone else, has ever asked why he has a perpetually broken arm.
Though this is never mentioned in-game, the Deadly Fortune graphic novel, which the game's writer wrote and considers canon despite the deviations it takes and it being written after he left Capcom, clarifies that Nero and Kyrie are childhood friends and haven't gotten into a romantic relationship by the time DMC4 starts. It also clarifies that Nero didn't have his double arm, until an incident not too long before the start of the game which injured his shoulder, hence the cast. Now, I'm normally not one to endorse looking up outside sources for a full understanding of something that should be standalone, especially one whose canonicity is in question, and that should be the sin here, but it doesn't hurt to look up information about the game you're sinning. It might answer your questions, which is precisely why, when critiquing something, other media does matter.
You know, my Heart of Ice may beat slower than most, but it still only took one of them to piece this intricately laid plot together.
One of your heart? I'm assuming this was a leftover from an earlier draft where you meant to say it only took one of your brain cells to figure that out.
A double-barreled revolver has to be the dumbest weapon ever in the history of outlandish weapons. You can only fire it 3 times before needing to reload.
You are aware you're talking about a Devil May Cry game, right? A series predominantly defined by rule of cool where style overtakes practicality? You even admit in your last sin that you played this game in preparation for Devil May Cry 5, implying that you're a fan that got to this game late, or at least that game got your attention at E3 last year.
This will be the only time in the game Nero has to reload despite the inefficient design of his gun. In fact, this may be the only time in the series' history that a character has been shown reloading a weapon.
Actually, Lady was shown reloading in DMC3.
These monoliths are Hellgates, and they are scattered all around the city, yet Nero doesn't destroy them even after seeing demons popping out of them.
This is a sin shared with the GCN video that I find a bit odd. Namely, the sin should be that Nero doesn't even make an attempt to destroy the Hellgates. And if Nero couldn't destroy the Hellgates, he'd probably still be sinned for being perceived as pathetic when compared to Dante's near-effortless destruction of them. Or at least you would've. This is the sort of thing that sin videos tend to fall into. Sinned if you do, sinned if you don't. And now for another recurring issue.
It's almost like Capcom decided that after turning down publishing Bayonetta, they would stick a character that apes her style in the new DMC game before Bayonetta could launch.
The strange insinuation that, somehow, Capcom had advanced knowledge of Bayonetta's existence and preemptively ripped it off in Devil May Cry 4, mainly with Gloria. It may be meant as a joke in light of the similarities, but some later sins imply he actually believes this. The issue with that is, while Bayonetta's starting development in January 2007 does line up with DMC4's early 2008 release, I found no indication that Capcom ever had any advanced knowledge of Bayonetta, let alone rejected publishing it. In fact, Kamiya has noted that he played Devil May Cry 4 for research on Bayonetta's development. While I found no explicit confirmation, it's completely possible that the Gloria character served as a basis for Bayonetta's personality and combat style, rather than a paradoxical other way around. If anything, though, it's a hilarious in hindsight coincidence.
Well, that's an angle that doesn't leave much to the imagination.
You did say earlier that 2008 video game boob jiggle physics turned an entire generation into ass men, so wouldn't this be appealing to them? Then again, the last game had Dante fight his first battle completely shirtless, so I say the fan service is fairly equal.
So this is where Nintendo got the idea for Splatoon.
This is another thing both Sin videos comment that I find questionable. Splatoon is a game where kid squids try to cover as much of an area as possible with ink. Bale, and Dagon for that matter, is a demon partially inspired by toads and anglerfish with 2 human female-like feelers. I suppose they do look a bit like octolings, but the correlation is still fairly vague to me.
No explanation will be given for why Virgil's katana is here, unless that was explained in the DLC, and I don't really care if it was.
A few things. A, that is technically the correct spelling, but not for the Virgil you're referring to. This mistake pops up a couple more times, with Triss instead of Trish,
that magical curtain Triss pulled out of the ground,
Krato instead of Krato, and even Sanctum instead of Sanctus, the latter being particularly odd since Sanctus is correctly referred to multiple times earlier. There's even a misspelling of therefore and research. Spelling mistakes can crop up here and there, but one should take care to try and mitigate that as much as possible. B. DLC? You mean Virgil's campaign in the special edition? which is not DLC for the vanilla release of Devil May Cry 4, which had no DLC at all. Even the special edition only had time saver stuff and pre-order costumes for Lady and Trish. And C, no. Virgil's story only features 2 scenes that take place even before DMC 3, and even then it's basically fluff to justify his inclusion. There is no real answer as to how the hell Yamato escaped the demon world, with the closest being something from the DMC 5 Visions of V manga, so the actual point of the sin is still correct.
Once again, Nero doesn't destroy the Hellgate that the demons are pouring out of.
We went through this! Are you stupid or what? Now who the hell is Dante?
You seriously don't know who the son of Sparta is? The guy the city worships? That's like living in the Vatican and not knowing who Jesus is.
It's been made perfectly clear that Nero gives no fucks about the Order of the Sword's religion and likely doesn't pay attention to Sparta's lineage. Which would be quite ironic, but still.
You possess the power of a demon.
What of it? So do you. You transform into one to fight Nero.
It's perceived as angelic power.
I have been chosen to take the next step in evolution, to become something far more than just a human. I am an angel.
I imagine Kratos ain't entirely privy to the specifics of Agnes's research.
Man, I wish Nero could parry like that when I'm in control of him. In-game, all he can do is dodge.
Actually, parrying is a simple matter of attacking as the enemy's about to hit you. Any of DMC4's playable cast can do it. I learned of this while fighting the Mephisto enemies in Virgil's campaign.
A thing of utter and pure beauty. Go blow yourself.
This is why I hate Nero. Lines of stupid require Dante's sass for a proper response. Nero just gets angry.
Sanctus has Kyrie held hostage and threatened to be permanently merged with the Savior. Nero clearly has no reason to get pissy with Sanctus at the moment, right? Besides, like it or hate it, Nero's brashness separates him from Dante's cockiness and Virgil's collectedness.
I had originally intended to intervene to our Savior. But circumstance presenting, I'd rather choose the option at hand.
You mean you could have gone through with this plan to create a god statue anytime you wanted, but held out in hopes of absorbing Dante, and then in the end went with Nero and his girlfriend and it works just as well?
Not at any time. They also needed Yamato repaired to open the Hellgates and Sparta the Sword to awaken the Savior, things they did not have until the events of the game. Even considering the need for Sparta's blood, Sanctus explicitly states he had eyes on Dante, something Nero was at first going to give to them until he started learning more of the truth. Kyrie was only used for Nero's motivation and was by no means a requirement. At least she's lucky she wasn't fridged.
And they didn't bother animating Kratos' mouth for that line.
Angelo Kratos' mouth was not animated for the rest of the game, and one could argue it's more of a visual touch in this form rather than a functioning mouth.
The Order's plan was to unleash demons from the Hellgates they created, then use the Savior to destroy them in hopes of spreading this religion further to control the world. But why start in the city of Fortuna, a city that already follows the religion? You are literally preaching to the choir.
Word can spread, especially if the DMC world is reflective of our own heavily social media-driven society.
But the real problem is the Order. Lately they've been running amok, catching demons, and have even butted in on some of my jobs.
Maybe they're starting a zoo.
Not just demons. They've also been targeting devil arms, like the ones you have.
Had you three not gotten involved, none of this would have mattered. The Order couldn't complete the Savior without the Sword of Sparta, and they couldn't open the Hellgate without Yamato. You gave them Sparta to get inside, and while they had Yamato, it was broken until Nero came along and fixed it, and that only happened because he was chasing after you. And from the sound of Lady's report, the Order wasn't really doing anything wrong, just looking for devil arms. Apparently that was enough to convince Dante to head there and assassinate Sanctum. So all of this is your fault.
My guess is that their interference with Lady's jobs were a deliberate way to lure out Dante and get what they needed, especially considering Sanctus wanted Dante specifically to awaken the Savior. Besides, work is work for Dante, and Trish does get called out on giving the Order Sparta in the post-credits scene.
You summon and kill. Summon and kill. I fail to see the logic here. Senate. The price to pay for power?
It was really nice of Agnes to not only play along with Dante here, but to be the one who started the Shakespeare bit and set up the lighting for it.
Logistically, that's a fair point, but this scene is so hugely entertaining that it more than deserves a pass.
It takes a journey to hell for them to accept and praise their god.
Agnes has had a stuttering problem the entire game. What happened to that now that he's doing a performance?
D-Gladiator in the comments points out that people with stuttering problems tend to overcome it when reciting something already written. Something I found to be true from MayoClinic.org, specifically noting the same circumstances that Agnes is currently in. What do you know?
This makes the third time I've had to fight all these bosses. Why do people consider DMC to be the worst game in the series? I think this game is by far the laziest.
First, either because they never played Devil May Cry 2, or the story and characters were just that irritating and the gameplay not as engaging as past games. It's truly an opinion thing. Secondly, Devil May Cry games have always made you fight the same bosses again. Especially Devil May Cry 1 where Nightmare, Griffin, Phantom, and Nilo Angelo were all fought 3 times each, albeit in different ways. Same goes for the Virgil fights in DMC3, which also featured a boss rush. Not every fight in the boss rush was mandatory, but you still had to fight those bosses again with no significant change like in 4. The only reason you could realistically call DMC4 lazy is the fact that Dante's part is 95% repeated from Nero's part. Mainly because the game was rushed and also under budget constraints. Here's proof.
後々ユーザーの方からは不満を言われたところではあるんですけども、マップを行って帰ってくるっていうところも実は予算的には3とそんな変わらない予算で、同じ作り方だと到底予算と期日に間に合わないということで、シナリオとうまく噛み合わせればこれぐらいの予算で素晴らしいゲームになるんじゃないかというところでチャレンジした。
This has the added benefit of disproving your claim of DMC4 being lazy. They did their best given the constraints.
What is going on, guys? This is Dobbs here, bringing you another Pokemon video. And in this video, I'm going to show you 10 of the most overpowered Pokemon you will ever see. And just a disclaimer, this is a list of Pokemon that are overpowered compared to how they're known, not overall. And also, we have a very special guest for this video. Allow me to introduce Tricky Wee.
Hey guys, this is Tricky, but you could call me Tricky.
Oh god, I can see the backlash now, considering the last time someone commentated on one of her videos. I don't hate Tricky. I mean, she represents herself in my favorite evolution. But if she screws up, know that I'd have said the same thing if it came out of Dobbs' mouth. Hell, I'd be criticizing it regardless of who says it. My beef is, and always has been, with the arguments presented in the video. Not the people presenting them, nor the opinions. Of course we can have our own opinions, but the reasonings behind them can be quite flawed sometimes. This extends to me as well. We'll see how this pans out.
And if you don't know who Tricky is, she's a YouTuber who does Pokemon Top 10s, Sun and Moon News.
Might not want to sell your channel on something that will no doubt become meaningless in due time.
It would definitely be these two. And also, we're doing another video on her channel, Top 10 Pokemon that could take over the world.
Of course! Sorry, it's become an instinct of mine.
So be sure to check out that video after this one. So without further ado, let's get started.
Oh, and keep in mind the lack of criteria for later.
This list, a whopping level 1 Rattata is hilariously overpowered. And here's why. If you breed a Rattata with Endeavor and Quick Attack, you are definitely capable of taking out most of the champions in the Elite Four. And here's the strategy. You give your level 1 Rattata a Focus Sash, let the opponent's Pokemon attack you, live with 1 HP, attack back with Endeavor, and then finally, finish the target off with a Quick Attack. And if you don't know what Endeavor does, it causes the opponent's HP to change from that's equal to yours. Therefore, 1 HP Pokemon for days.
Actually, that'd be rather hard either way, as the Focus Sash only works once, and Rattata would still need 2 turns to defeat anything. Sure, it can defeat any non-ghost type enemy with this strategy, but unless you luck out with evasion like the example I'm showing here, that Rattata's going down once the next Pokemon gets sent out.
It's too bad you can't do this on ghost type Pokemon, because if you could, it might just actually be possible to sweep the whole Elite Four with just a level 1 Rattata, and that would be insane. Oh, and by the way, try to keep this between you and me, because if youngster Joey found out about this, expect a text every minute. Oh no. Fuck.
Say, where's Tricky? This is a collaboration between you guys, so shouldn't she be
taking our number 9 spot?
Yeah, she is! Wait, it's another one of those, isn't it? How many PokeTuber Countdown collabs have the two alternating entries instead of actually interacting with one another, even though that's the entire point of a collab? I mean, give Arizo's starter videos credit for having him and his partner bounce off of each other in the videos, even if it often boils down to, I like this one, so it has to be the best, right? Well, no. Aw.
Taking our number 9 spot, we have Snivy from the anime.
Wait, Snivy from the anime? This brings me back to the lack of criteria I mentioned earlier. I know it's not an overall overpowered list, but you're taking multiple different canons into account here, which have vastly fluctuating power levels between each of them, making it difficult to really determine which one is more overpowered than another. Perfect example is here. I'll let you hear the entry for context.
Now this is a little bit messed up. In the first episode of the Pokemon Black and White anime, a level 5 Snivy takes out Ash's Pikachu. How? Ash's Pikachu has destroyed so many strong Pokemon in the past. It has to at least be level 80 or even more, so how in the world does a Pikachu get defeated by a level 5 Snivy? But how in the world can that even be possible? Level 80 Pikachu versus level 5 Snivy. Granted, Pikachu is not able to use its electric attacks due to an encounter with Zekrom, and it was pretty tired, but it's still very frustrating. Use a potion or something. The only other conclusion would be Ash started his adventure only a few months ago, and Pikachu is still very, very weak. But isn't this the same Pikachu that took out a freaking Dragonite in the Orange League? This anime is very confusing. So Snivy either completely outsmarted Pikachu and used its tiredness against it, or it has super godlike stats.
Skipping a conspiracy theory, you get what I mean, right? The Fear strategy can easily take down even legendary Pokemon, and yet Trip Snivy is higher than it due to shitty writing. I mean, beating a Pikachu known to have taken down legendary Pokemon and, as mentioned before, even statistically superior pseudo-legendaries on its own, yet has also been known for being beaten by even weaker Pokemon. Like I said, shitty writing. Well, for the loss against Snivy, at least.
Moving on to number 8, we have Nidoking. In Pokemon Red, Nidoking was definitely a great Pokemon to have.
But not in blue or yellow? Or green for that matter?
Now, if you didn't know, the male Nidoran was obtainable very early in the game, even before Viridian Forest. Not only that, by the time you made it to Mount Moon, your Nidoran should have already evolved to Nidorino, and was ready for the Moonstone. So right off the bat, you had a Nidoking ready to face Misty.
Yeah, Nidoking wouldn't struggle against Misty at all. Right, and Charmander could defeat Brock in the original games as well. Oh, I really need something this hilariously dumb, so I can at least thank Dobbs for that. Oh, that was fucking funny.
In order for your Nidoking to become a god, you would first need to buy a couple of X accuracies and a TM Horn Drill. Now back in Generation 1, there was a huge flaw with X accuracy. This not only gave you better accuracy, but it gave you perfect accuracy. See where I'm getting at? Now with this overpowered item, you can use this overpowered move and literally one-hit most Pokemon with Nidoking. And I say most because you need to be faster than the opposing Pokemon for a KO move to work. But still, obtaining a Nidoking so early in the game and being able to one-hit everything literally broke the game.
I'm surprised the reasoning wasn't a glitch though. You get a level 1 Nidoking that could instantly become level 100 before you even leave Viridian Forest. Now that's hilariously overpowered. But I suppose people would call cop-out if you mentioned that. Nidoking isn't the only Pokemon that applies to, and you at least found a reason in using a real in-game strategy. Skip! Skip! Oh, fuck this!
Moving on to number 4, we chose Torchic from the Pokemon X and Y event, and here's why. On release of Pokemon X and Y, there was an event for a free Torchic holding a Blaziken item. And let me tell you, that later to be Blaziken was one of the most overpowered Pokemon I've ever seen. I literally Blazikicked my way through that game. It was too easy, and it probably didn't help that you had the advantage with just your Torchic for most of the gym leaders. I mean Viola, Heck and Ember, Grant, Double Kick, Karina, Double Kick, Ramos, Flame Wheel, and by Clement, you probably already had a Blaziken with Blazikick, which can one-hit almost anything. So it's safe to say that this Blaziken made Pokemon X and Y an extremely easy game. And for that reason, we chose the event Torchic for number 4 on this list.
Well, ignoring how overpowered the XP show was in that game, so X and Y were easy regardless of the event Torchic, the real reason why it was so overpowered was because of it being an event Pokemon, as in, not yours. If a Pokemon is not yours, then it gains experience at a much faster rate than Pokemon you personally caught. Therefore, it'll naturally be at a higher level than most of your team, especially with the XP share on. The only caveat is that it may not obey you depending on how strong you let it get, but each succeeding gym leader will temporarily circumvent that problem until it's gone altogether. I know that simply bolstered Dobbs' point, but it wouldn't have hurt to go the extra mile to explain that actually rather crucial detail.
Smeargle. You probably wouldn't have expected this Pokemon to be anywhere near powerful back in 2001, because it probably wasn't. This little painter didn't actually become recognized as a strong Pokemon until 2007, so why does 2007 give this Pokemon any significance? It's because that is the year that Darkrai was discovered. Darkrai has a very powerful move called Dark Void, and this targets all enemies and has an 80% chance of making them fall asleep. Do you know how annoying that is? Smeargle's signature move is Sketch, and this gives it the ability to copy any move that it sees in battle. On top of that, if a Smeargle has its special ability Moody, it could raise a stat by 2 stages and lower another by 1. So if you were up against a Smeargle who had Moody that raised its accuracy, you would be in a world of pain and sorrow. The likelihood of Dark Void actually missing your Pokemon is highly unlikely. If you play your cards right, Smeargle will always live for at least 2 turns.
This is the point I mentioned in the skip card, is not only are we dealing with different canons here, but also Pokemon that are overpowered for completely different reasons. Mega Quaquaque could easily wreck Smeargle, but a Focus Smash Smeargle with Dark Void could easily shut down Mega Quaquaque just as easily. And the X and Y event Torchic blows through the Kalos League, but it's otherwise not broken in the Battle Mason or multiplayer formats. Even when taking the disclaimer into account, you're telling me that a fully evolved starter Pokemon can be more hilariously overpowered by OHKOing regular Mons than a first route Mon that can devastate God. This issue could have been resolved with either a restructuring to account for what the disclaimer implies, or a simple title change. 10 hilariously overpowered Pokemon, and a brief mention of how they'll cover different versions of certain Pokemon across the entire franchise. By calling it a top 10, you imply that each succeeding entry is in some way better than the ones preceding it. But as I said, it's hard to determine that since, even between the games, some Pokemon are seen as such for completely different reasons. So it's less which one is better, but more of constant apples to oranges comparisons. And unorganized numbered selections aren't foreign concepts to the PokeTuber community, so it's not just to maintain familiarity with the format.
For runner-up, a level 5 Scyther takes the place of being one of the most overpowered Pokemon you will ever see. And here's why. In Pokemon Stadium 2, in Little Cup Round 2, Pokefan Rex has a Scyther that's unbelievably powerful. Now you gotta keep in mind, in the Little Cup, you can only have level 5 Pokemon. So Pokemon such as Onix, Chansey, and Scyther, who didn't have any evolutions at the time,
I know this doesn't disprove his argument that Pokefan Rex's Scyther is much too strong for a Little Cup Pokemon, though I found he isn't the only one with a Scyther in Little Cup. But it really doesn't help the issue of certain PokeTubers not doing their research, as honestly, this is something that even casual Pokemon fans would know by now.
The first rule is that these are only pure Dark-type Pokemon. No dual types allowed, like Weavile.
Well, that's a very limiting choice of options. Since, counting evolutionary families as separate Pokemon, you've only got 9 mono Dark types to work with. Wait, you're counting Mega Absol then? That's really stretching it. can't you at least make it so Pokemon that at least have a primary dark typing, like Weavile, can make the list as well to make it more interesting? I mean, how are you gonna deal with the flying type list? Number 10 is Tornadus. Number 9 is... Be sure to like, share, and subscribe! You could make the argument that it would make his future list predictable, but the addition of primary typed Pokemon can easily prevent the repetition of certain Pokemon, other than flying types, since that's often used as a secondary typing. By the way, good luck keeping that rule for mono rock and steel types. Skipping rule 2 since it's basically saying no Mega Gyarados, Arceus Dark, or Hoopa Unbound.
The best Dark-type Pokemon have to be those that are strong enough to hold their own in a Pokemon battle, while also being able to support their allies during a competitive double battle.
Oh boy, that particular rule will be important later.
Number 10 is Poochyena. The first Pokemon you encounter during your journey in Hoenn is always this sucker. And as many a shiny hunter knows, this is the most common failed shiny Pokemon as well.
Oh. A shiny? A shiny? Are you kidding me? Really?
Hello, Skull? I get the shiny is ball busting, but can you say some— What? Yep, it's later! Poochyena is not a fully evolved Pokemon. I know that very well, but there's absolutely nothing about battle capabilities brought up here. Just that you encounter it early game and it remains the bane of Gen 3 shiny hunters. You'll never catch me, Batman! Nothing about how it can be a good early teammate with its noticeable base physical attack and moves, especially in Auras where Dex Navigate can get you some great egg moves to run with. I get that's only number 10, but unless it's for a quick joke that sums it all up, which the shiny thing doesn't do, these segments really shouldn't be shorter than that one Brony Pody hater drama video I made / took from a Dinner Warrior YouTube poop several years back.
Number 9, Purloin. A Dark-type cat Pokemon can only mean sinister things are afoot. Purloin are often sneaky and manipulative, and usually get exactly what they want. While it has the lowest attack stat of all Dark-type Pokemon, it still finds uses in other areas.
First, it's an early route Pokemon that can evolve. Of course you're not going to get another Scyther situation where it's already so powerful it simply gets a stat redistribution upon evolving. Second, 50 base attack is not god-awful for what Purloin is. Its base special stat is literally no better, and it only learns physical or status moves by level up anyway. Third, I'd ask if you were going to elaborate on what other areas Purloin can be useful in, but the audience should know that's a key sign that you won't. Instead, you briefly discuss its character in the anime, which has no impact on its battling capabilities, and is inconsistent with the unbelievably brief Poochyena segment, so I'm gonna skip!
Imagine the terror that goes through its enemies' minds when they see a Mewtwo or a Rayquaza hit the battlefield, never suspecting that it's really just a small fox Pokemon in disguise.
Provided you're gonna bring a friggin' Zora to a battle of legendaries. Not to mention lets the opponent know that you have that Pokemon in your team and can plan accordingly.
Absol gets a bad rap. Numerous Pokédex entries state how it always shows up right before disaster strikes. In the Pokemon games, it's usually found in places where villainous teams are not far behind. But on the bright side, that usually means that having an Absol on your team means certain doom for your opponents. In Unova, Absol appears on Route 13. It's also the final Pokemon to be featured on the Pokemon Trainer's Choice cards that 4Kids used to do. Absol seems to be a very unlucky Pokemon indeed, but maybe that's why it's so loved by so many people. I would be happy to have an Absol on my team anytime because I know, as long as it's with me, I am well protected.
I'm sorry, but am I watching a best Dark types countdown determined partly by battle capabilities? Or did you know Pokemon video about Absol? Save the trivia for after you've given us the relevant information, please.
And our number 6 spot is Liepard. This Pokemon looks almost too graceful to be a Dark-type Pokemon, but like its pre-evolved form, Liepard is a conniving, manipulative bitch. Its most useful moves, including Knock Off and Sucker Punch, are the best examples of Dark-type moves out there. Crafty and subtle, Liepard can deal some serious damage. Or, if it's feeling especially pesky, it'll just encore you into using the same move over and over and over again. Give it some black glasses to boost those Dark-type moves even more. Yep, despite its beauty, Liepard is still a Dark-type Pokemon. Not the best, by far not the best, but still worth mentioning.
More worth mentioning than the one that can Mega Evolve, and in base form is statistically better than Liepard in every way save speed and status utility. You finally brought up battle capabilities and you still screwed it up!
Number 5 on this list is Mightyena. There is just one word that best fits this Pokemon. Crunch. A crunch from a Mightyena hits hard. Just look at it. This Pokemon has crunch written all over its face. And where crunch fails, just use a Play Rough or Iron Tail to hit everything else.
You'll need Dex Nav or Breeding for the former, and Auras BP move tutors for the latter. Also, Absol hits way harder. It might not get crunch, but it sure gets Night Slash and the ability Super Luck. Crits for days, my boy. Skip!
Send it out looking like a random Poison-type Pokemon, and your opponent will be caught off guard when Psychic doesn't affect it.
Or, you know, they can use any other move and completely destroy Zorwork because it has the durability of a potato chip. Which, aside from Umbreon, is true of a lot of Pokemon on the list.
Number 2, Mega Absol. We have to bend the rules here, because if we counted Mega Absol as just an extension of Absol, we wouldn't have enough pure Dark-type Pokemon in existence to do a top 10.
Just do a top 9. There's no official rulebook on countdowns where it must be a top 10, and you admit that putting Mega Absol in here is a stretch, so why'd you fucking do it? For that matter, you mentioned Sun and Moon could fix that.
Hopefully Pokemon fixes that with Sun and Moon,
like it does for Mono Rock types, so why not wait until then?
Absol gains the usual stat boosts all around the board when it Mega Evolves, but it also grows a pair of wings. When you hear about Dark Pokemon, you usually don't think about Angels, and yet here is one of the most powerful Dark types in existence, and that's exactly what it is. An Angel. But the number one...
That's it? No mention of the extremely rare and useful Magic Bounce ability? This segment is raising too many questions! And one of those isn't the number 1 figment, as it's easy to guess through process of elimination. Darkrai. Which, to be fair, is one of my favorite legendary... Wait, the legendary tops the list? Really?
Darkrai is the best example of what a Dark-type Pokemon should be.
All Dark types must be overpowered sleep abusers, variety be damned!
Its Dark Void attack is so powerful, it hits all of your opponent's Pokemon, putting them to sleep and rendering them useless.
Provided it actually works on the Pokemon, since there are poison healers out there, as well as Insomniacs, Pokemon with Vital Spirit, and the possibility to miss the Pokemon entirely. Yes, Dark Void is one of the most accurate sleep-inducing moves in the game, but it's hardly perfect.
Darkrai can learn an assortment of moves as well, which place it in the perfect position to combat just about any threat.
Any threat that doesn't outspeed it and/or pulls a fighting bug or fairy move on it, especially when facing legendaries where its 70, 90, 90 bulk won't cut it.
Darkrai is so powerful, it's completely banned from all official Pokemon tournaments. It's just too good.
As are all mythical Pokemon, some of which aren't even nearly that overpowered.
Without a doubt, Darkrai is the best Dark-type Pokemon in existence.
Well, it being a legendary Pokemon, that's quite unfair, which makes the list even more egregious.